Manyando was living like a maid in her own father's house. Her father Chama only took Mapalo to outings, while Manyando stayed at home, crying and weeping. Many years ago, there lived a beautiful young lady called Chipo. Chipo was a hairdresser and she was married to the love of her life, Chama, who was a driver. And although they earned just enough to take care of themselves, they were very much in love with each other. Their love was love at first sight. They had been lovers since secondary school. And immediately they had learnt a trade after their secondary school education. They both got married. Their love was so sweet and beautiful to behold that even couples that were richer than them wanted to be like them. They wanted to have what they had. Chipo and Chama had always dreamt of having only 2 children. A girl first, then a boy. So it was no surprise that barely 6 months after they got married, Chipo found out that she was pregnant. Chama came back from work one day when Chipo broke the good news to him and said, "Chama, I am pregnant." Chama was so happy. "Hey, so I'm going to be a father." Chama screamed in excitement. And from that day onwards, Chama never allowed Chipo to do any housework. He cooked for her, he cleaned for her, and literally did everything, all the work in the house. Chipo was so happy, not just because of how her husband loved and treated her, especially now during pregnancy, but also because the other women in the compound envied her. They would sometimes even approach her and say, "Chipo, what did you give your husband? What did you put in his food that he loves you this much like this? Please give me some. Or take me to the baba that did what you did for your husband." Her neighbor, Mary, would say to Chipo, and she would blush and say, "I did not do anything. My husband just loves me like that." Chama, he never missed any antenatal appointments. He always followed Chipo to every single doctor's appointment. He really loved his wife. Chama and Chipo were so happy when they found out they were having a baby girl. Their plan of having a daughter first was about to come to pass. They had already even given her a name, Mapalo, meaning blessings. Chama continued to pamper his wife all through the pregnancy, while anticipating the arrival of their baby girl, Mapalo. So one fateful night, Chama and Chipo were asleep when she began to feel some slight cramps in her stomach. And then she knew that it was time for her blessing to arrive. So she woke her husband Chama up, and he quickly rushed her to the hospital. While Chipo was wheeled into the labor room, Chama could be seen pacing around the hospital looking very worried. He was so excited at the thought of being a father, but he worried that nothing should go wrong. A few minutes later, the doctor came out and looked at Chama and said, "Congratulations, your wife just gave birth to a beautiful baby girl." "Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you so much, Doctor," Chama said, sounding very excited. But he realized that the doctor was not smiling. So he asked, "What is it, doctor? Is everything okay? Why are you not happy? Wait, how is my wife?" Chama asked, starting to get worried. "Well, I'm so sorry, sir, but we just realized that you're also having another baby, a second baby, and your wife is yet to deliver her. And it's not looking good at all. We need to do surgery now. Your wife is getting really weak," the doctor said, looking worried. Chama could not believe his ears. "Doc, a second baby? Please, do anything to save my wife. I don't care if the second baby dies or not. Nothing must happen to my wife. That one is my life," Chama said, crying and pleading with the doctor. And after the doctor went back to attend to Chipo, Chama kept on crying and praying so hard. He had never prayed that way in his life before. He kept on pleading with God, saying, "Please, God, do not let Chipo die, God, please. I promise, if you save my wife's life, I will give you 1 million kwacha. During our child dedication, I will sell my bus, I will give you everything," Chama said, crying. However, after what seems to be like eternity, the doctor came out looking all gloomy and very sad, then said, I'm sorry, but we lost Chipo. We tried all our possible best, but it was too late, the doctor said, sadly. No, doctor, no, doctor, please do something. My wife cannot die like that, Chama said, crying like a baby. But Chipo was dead and gone, and there was nothing that could be done. Chama wept and wept bitterly. So a few hours later, Chama, with tears in his eyes, left the hospital with his first daughter, Mapalo. He did not even care to know the gender of the second baby. He was very upset. He did not want anything to do with the second baby. So he abandoned the baby at the hospital. As far as he was concerned, that second baby had killed his wife. He wished the second baby had died rather than his wife. His world came crashing down. So it was later in the evening that the nurses in the hospital had traced Chama's house and brought his second baby home, saying, sir, you forgot your second child. You forgot your child at the hospital. Nurse Rose said, looking worried. I don't want anything to do with that witch that killed my wife. We were expecting only one girl. All through the time we went through antenatal, nobody ever told us that we're having 2 babies. Now this one has come from nowhere and killed my wife. I hate her. I don't want to ever see this baby again, Chama said, weeping profusely. Chama was broken at the loss of his beloved wife, Chipo, and he blamed her death on the second twin. But after all that was said and done, the nurse had to leave the second twin with her father, saying, sir, this is your problem, sir. Anything that you're going to do with your child, it's your child, but I can't carry it. Me, I'm just a nurse. I have to leave her here with you. You're the father, Nurse Rose said as she handed over the second twin to Chama. And that marked the beginning of the hatred Chama had for his second child. So whereas he named his first baby Mapalo, meaning blessings, and he named his second child Manyando, meaning suffering. So Chama began to show more preference to Mapalo. If Mapalo and Manyando were crying, he would rather pick Mapalo and cuddle her while he left Manyando to cry. He would usually feed Mapalo very well first and then give Manyando the leftovers of Mapalo's food. Their neighbors and everyone around them knew that he loved Mapalo more and hated Manyando, and they all took pity on Manyando. Some of the men had even tried speaking to him about how he treated his second daughter unfairly, saying, Chama, children are a blessing from God. They are gifts from the Lord. It's not your daughter Manyando's fault that her mother died during delivery. She had no hand in the death of her mother, and you need to stop treating her like she's a second-class citizen. In her own father's house, the men in his compound would say to him, it's her fault, and I would treat her out as I please. She should have died instead of my wife, instead of my Chipo, Chama would reply, crying. So Chama continues to maltreat his second daughter Manyando while he pampered his first daughter Mapalo. A few years later, Mapalo and Manyando were already 12 years old, and whereas Mapalo was dressed very beautifully and enjoyed the love and attention of her father at all times, Manyando was always sad and always looked unhappy and she was very afraid of her father. Manyando was living like a maid in her own father's house. Her father Chama only took Mapalo to outings, while Manyando stayed at home, crying and weeping. Manyando was the one that would sweep, clean the house, and do all the house chores, while Mapalo would sit in the parlor looking pretty and watching television. Manyando was also the brighter one, but she had to do Mapalo's assignments as well. And during exams, her father had warned her, always write Mapalo's name on her examination scripts. So while Manyando would usually come first at the end of the term, Mapalo would either come 15th, 17th, or 20th, because while Manyando would always write Mapalo on her examination papers, Mapalo would have to do the same on her own paper. But because she was not so intelligent as Manyando, so Mapalo would always come 15th or 16th in their class. So Manyando grew up knowing that her father did not love her and that her twin sister Mapalo was not willing to share the love of her father with her. So Mapalo even began to maltreat Manyando too. In no time, Manyando turns to food, as that was the only thing that gave her some sort of comfort. Each time she picked a plate of food to eat, she was so happy, and before you knew it, Manyando began to grow very fat. A few years later, Manyando and Mapalo had graduated from secondary school and they were ready to go to the university. But Chama only allowed Mapalo to apply to the university, and because he knew that Mapalo was not so intelligent, he had to bribe a few persons just so they could give his beloved daughter Mapalo admission into the university. But Chama refused Manyando from going to the university. Manyando was so broken. She cried and cried. She even begged her father, but her father still refused. So while Mapalo went to the university, Manyando had to stay back home, doing nothing but cooking and cleaning after her father, like a mere maid. Manyando was so sad. So she continued to eat even more food, as food was the only thing that gave her solace. Her father would usually abuse and insult her at the slightest provocation, saying, "Look at you, see how fat and ugly you are. I wish you had died instead of your mother." Manyando continued like that for the next 4 years. During all the abuse and insults her father and her sister rained on her. A few years later, Mapalo had graduated from the university, and although she graduated with a credit amidst all the school sortings and briberies that her father had to pay for, Chama was very happy that his favorite daughter Mapalo had graduated. Barely 3 months after Mapalo had graduated, handsome, successful men had started trooping into Chama's house to ask for Mapalo's hand in marriage. It was as though Manyando was invisible. Manyando would always peep and look sadly as young, successful men came to visit her twin sister, Mapalo. Her father would always call her out to bring drinks to entertain their guests, saying, "Manyando, since you're good for nothing, at least come and save your sister's guests," Chama would say, and Manyando would come in, covered in shame, to save Mapalo's guests. Mapalo's guests would usually stare at her in shock and disgust. A few months later, Mapalo had finally picked one of the men to settle down with, so she got married to her heartthrob, Mwila. Mwila worked in a very big mine company, so their wedding ceremony was a very lavish one, but Manyando was not allowed to attend, as her sister Mapalo said she would make people uncomfortable and embarrass her guests. Manyando was so sad. She wept and wept and even ate more food as usual, just so she could find some comfort. A few months after their wedding, Mapalo found out that she was pregnant. She and her husband Mwila were so happy. They both shared the good news with Chama, who was also very happy. And as usual, Chama raised curses and insults on Manyando, saying, "Look at your life. You're at home busy eating and eating and eating, growing fat, while your sister is advancing in life, building a home, and now she's pregnant and expecting a baby. Who do you think will even want to marry you with the way you're looking?" Chama would say, mocking his daughter. And as usual, Manyando would weep and weep profusely. A few months later, Mapalo had given birth, and she had requested her father to send her twin sister, Manyando, to come and live with her so she can come and take care of their baby. So she called their father one day and said, "Daddy, I'm stressed. Taking care of a newborn baby is not an easy thing at all. It's not an easy job. Daddy, I was thinking, if Manyando is not so useful to you, why can't you send her here? Can you please send her over to take care of my baby? After all, if not for her, my mother would have been alive to come and take care of me and the baby." Mapalo said, sulking, "Of course, my daughter. You don't need to mention it twice. If you need Manyando to be there, she'll be there first thing tomorrow in the morning," Chama said, trying to pacify his beloved daughter. So Chama called Manyando and said, "Hurry, Pack your bags. You're going to live with your sister since you killed your mother, who would have been the one taking care of your sister. Now that she has a baby, you would have to go there yourself and take care of your sister and her baby. And if you like, go and disgrace yourself and be eaten like a buffoon, Chama said angrily. But Daddy, I don't want to go to Mapalo's house, Manyando replied angrily. Look at you. Did I at any time ask you whether you want to go or not? You're going and that's final. I did not ask for your opinion, Chama replied angrily. So Manyando left his presence, weeping and weeping profusely. So the next day, Manyando was at her sister's house. And that day marked another level of premium suffering. Her sister Mapalo maltreated her and treated her so badly. She literally treated her like a maid. The day Manyando arrived at Mapalo's house, Mapalo called Manyando to give her a pep talk and a list of do's and don'ts, as though she was a maid, saying, I need you to be awake by 4 a.m. and ensure that the whole house is clean from top to bottom. You need to wash all the 5 toilets every day, whether or not anybody uses them. I need you to dust everywhere properly. I don't want to see a single dirty cloth in this house. If not, you and I are going to have a very big problem. And by 6 a.m., you should be done with all the cleanup. And make sure you take a bath and wash up all the dirt in your body very well. Then you can now set things for me to bathe my baby. And I do not want you in my bedroom for any reason. Have I made myself clear? Mapalo said angrily. Yes, I've heard you, Mapalo, Manyando replied sadly. So from that day, Manyando would sweep, clean, and do all the house chores in the house. She would even carry the baby and feed the baby, while Mapalo and her husband Muila slept at night. Manyando was a full-time maid with no pay to her own twin sister. She always cried and wept. She wished that she had died at birth rather than suffer like this in the hands of her father, now her sister. Even Mapalo's husband Muila had also started molesting her. Whenever Mapalo was not there, he would touch her inappropriately and even tease her. But whenever Mapalo was home, he would always talk down on her and mock her, saying, my beautiful wife, how can this one be called your twin sister? This ugly, fat, round thing be your blood sister. Not to talk of your twin sister. Are you sure they did not make a mistake at the hospital? Muila would say, laughing. And Mapalo would reply and say, my dear husband, I've also noticed that thing several times though. See me now, a full spec and more, a hot babe. See my twin sister. See how she's round like Michelin tire. Anyway, at least she's useful in keeping the house clean, Mapalo would say, and they would both laugh. Manyando would always cry and weep profusely. She wondered if her life would always continue to be like this. She wanted more. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to own businesses. She wanted to have a family. She wanted to be healthy and fit. And she wanted to be free from all the abuse on her by her sister, father, and now her sister's husband. She had saved her sister and her father all her life. And now it looked like she was going to be saving her sister and her husband all her life. Her sister treated her even worse than her father. The only thing that her sister did better was to feed her. But at this point, the excess food she was giving Manyando was not just because she didn't want her to be hungry, but also because she wanted her to remain fat and ugly, so her and her husband could constantly make fun of her. So Manyando continued living with her twin sister and her husband. A few months later, Mapalo had returned to work, while Manyando stayed at home all day caring for her sister's baby. However, from the first day Mapalo resumed work, Muila would leave his office in the afternoon and come back home just so he could force himself on Manyando. Manyando could not stop him because he was way stronger than her, and when he was done forcing himself on her, he would dress up and go back to work, while Manyando would cry all day. There was nobody to talk to. Neither her father nor her sister would believe her, so she kept her mouth shut and Mwila continued abusing her like this for several months. One night, Mwila and Mapalo had both quarreled during the day, and Mwila wanted to feel the warmth of his wife, but she refused him. So after several attempts of trying to beg and cajole Mapalo, and Mapalo still refused. So he waited for a few minutes when he thought that Mapalo was asleep, and he decided to sneak out into Manyando's room to force himself on her as usual. However, this time, Manyando mustered all her strength and screamed her lungs out. She knew that this was the only opportunity she had to let Mapalo know that her husband had been abusing her. At least she thought that if Mapalo caught them red-handed, then she would be able to believe her when she tells her that her husband had been abusing her for several months. So Manyando screamed with all her might and her strength, and just as she had anticipated, her screams had woken her sister up. So Mapalo rushed to come and find out what was causing the commotion, only to see her husband in Manyando's room. "What's happening here?" Mapalo screamed, looking shocked. Is it not your fat, ugly twin sister that is trying to seduce me? I was on my own, and she started seducing me. I wonder what she's thinking, that I'll leave my hot wife, my hot babe, for her fat, round Michelin tire. Mwila replied, looking disgusted. It's not true, Mapalo. Your husband has been forcing himself on me for several months. He comes back home every afternoon to have his way with me. How can I be the one seducing him in my own room? What is he doing in my own room? It's the one that came to rape me as usual. Manyando said, crying. Mapalo believed her husband instead and started shouting at her sister. "Oh, so you took my mother away from me, and now you want to take my husband away from me too? How do you think my husband will even leave me? Look at me, a speck and more, a full package, and then try to force himself on you. You're not even his type, you're fat, you're ugly, but I have had enough. You're leaving my house tonight," Mapalo said angrily. "I'm telling you the truth, Mapalo. Mapalo, please believe me. Where will I go this night? Please, Mapalo, don't do this to me," Manyando said, crying, but all her plea fell on deaf ears. And Mapalo and her husband threw Manyando's things and forced her out of their house. Manyando stood in front of their gate at midnight, very afraid. She was crying and weeping. She clutched her bag tightly, as she did not have anywhere to go. Then after a while, she decided to walk, to look for a place to lay her head and sleep. As she walked, she saw a very beautiful car approaching her. She was very afraid. But the car stopped beside her, and a wealthy, handsome young man named David. He went down and looked at her. He could see tears and fear written all over her face. And immediately he had compassion on her and said, "Young lady, why are you out by this time, alone, by yourself? You know it's not safe. My name is David. What's your name? Please come into the car. Let me take you to your destination," David said while looking very worried. "My name is Manyando, sir. I don't have anywhere to go. My sister and her husband threw me out of their house this night. But I cannot come with you, sir. I do not know you. I don't know who you are." Manyando replied, crying, "I promise you that I will not hurt you or do anything untowardly to you. Please, it's not safe out here. Please come in. I'll take you to my home. At least spend the night there. Then if you want to go, you can go anywhere tomorrow morning. Please," David said reassuringly. So Manyando, after much hesitation, hopped into the car and followed David home. But she was still shaking and weeping profusely. So David took Manyando home. Manyando was shocked to see how beautiful his house was. They were welcomed by Louie and Tinashe, David's sisters. Manyando was so surprised to see that Louie and Tinashe were also fat as her. They both welcomed her warmly. David introduced them to Manyando as his sisters, and immediately she felt at home. Louie and Tinashe were so warm. They welcomed her and showed her to her room, even gave her a change of clothes, and also gave her food. Manyando was so grateful. She felt at home, and that night was the first time in years that she had a very peaceful sleep. So the following day, she narrated everything that had happened to her to David and his sisters. David and his sisters felt sorry for her, and David said, "You're not going back to that your family. You're not going back to that your father and sister. Nobody deserves to be treated the way your parents and twin sister treated you. You will stay with us until you figure out what you want." David's sister, Louis and Tinashe, both agreed with their brother. Manyando was so grateful. She felt a sense of relief. Over the next few weeks, for the first time in her life, she experienced what true sisterhood meant. Louis and Tinashe treated her like their own sister. They spent hours gisting together, they all went shopping together, and had so much fun together. They both really liked her, and she liked them too. David had observed that she was very intelligent, and he had even begun to fall in love with her, but he hid his feelings from her and his sisters. So after a few days, David called Manyando and asked her what she wanted to do, saying, "Manyando, if money was not a problem, what would you want to do with your life?" David asked. Manyando replied and said, "I would love to be a business consultant, owning several chains of businesses and consulting for businesses as well." Manyando replied. David was very impressed by her response, and this made him even fall more in love with Manyando. So a few months later, David paid for Manyando to apply in the same university that his sisters attended that year, and he even paid for a personal tutor to brush her up. So Manyando sat for the entrance exams, and she passed with flying colors and got admission into the university to study business administration. She was so happy. David and his sisters were also very happy for her. So a few months later, Manyando resumed at the university with David's sisters. She was so happy. Over the next few years, David paid for her school fees, and she felt like a part of their family. 4 years went by very quickly, and not once had David or his sisters ever talked down on her. Manyando would sometimes remember her father and sister, and she would feel so bad because since the day she was pushed out of her sister's house, neither her sister nor her father had made any efforts to look for her, and this made Manyando feel really bad. A few years later, Manyando had graduated from the university with distinctions. She was so happy. David and his sisters were also very happy for her. At this point, David could no longer hide his feelings for her. So he made his intentions known and said to her, "I love you so much and I would want to be your husband. Please, Manyando, would you marry me?" asked. "Yes, of course, I will marry you," Manyando replied excitedly. "But just one more thing. Are you sure you will not stop loving me because of my weight later?" "I'm very fat," Manyando asked sadly. "Never. I have always loved fat and thick women. You're my spec. You're everything I want in a woman. I love everything about you. Besides, have you not seen my sisters? They're also very fat, hey?" David said, smiling. Manyando was so happy. So a few weeks later, they had a lavish wedding ceremony. Manyando had gained a new family. David, who loved her very much, and now she had 2 new sisters who cherished her. She was so excited. David spoiled and pampered Manyando very much, and they continued to live together happily. A few years later, David and Manyando already had 4 beautiful children, and they were so happy. Manyando had moved on with her life, and she had long forgotten about her father and her sister. However, one day, Manyando was seated in her home when she saw someone that looked like her twin sister and her father and her husband, David, walking to the parlor. Immediately, Manyando set her eyes on them. She jumped to her feet and said, "What are these wicked people doing here?" Manyando said, shouting angrily, "Please, calm down, my love. Your father and sister traced down my office and came to see me. They have come to beg for your forgiveness and ask for your help." David said, trying to calm his wife down, "My father and sister, God forbid. I don't know them. They are dead to me. I don't have a father or sister. These ones here, they are not my family members, Manyando said, crying. And immediately, Mapalo and her father fell to their knees and started pleading with Manyando, saying, Manyando, please forgive us. They both chorused. And Chama said, I was consumed by the grief of losing my wife and transferred my aggression to you. I should never have blamed you for the loss of my wife. I'm so sorry, Manyando, Chama said, crying. For crying out loud, I was just a baby daddy. How could I have been responsible for the death of my mother? And you made my life a living hell for over 25 years. And as for you, Mapalo, I'm your twin sister. Yet you hated me so much. You joined our father to maltreat me, and you treated me as a maid. And even when you caught your husband abusing me, you accused me of seducing me and threw me out at night. Both of you are not worthy to be called my family, Manyando said, crying. I'm sorry, Manyando. Please, let bygones be bygones, Mapalo said, crying. Bygones kill you there. Bygones cannot be bygones. Just tell me the reason why the both of you are here and get out of my home and family, Manyando replied angrily. So Mapalo narrated how life had been very hard for her and her father Chama, and how her husband Mwila and her child had been involved in an accident and spent several months at the hospital and had finally died after they had spent all their savings and money on their hospital bills. Now Mapalo was very poor and the landlord had even thrown her out and she had nowhere to go. Chama, their father, had stopped working a long time ago as it was Mwila that had been taking care of him. But with the misfortune that had followed Mwila, Chama had also been affected. So they were now both very poor. After Manyando listened to all their sad stories, she was more convinced than ever that she wanted nothing to do with them. She looked at her father and sister and said, I knew it. So you only remember me because things are no longer rosy? Like I said, I'm not surprised. I do not want anything to do with you both ever again. But here, as she wrote a check of 20,000 kwacha and handed it over to her sister, use this to start your life afresh. But this should be the first and last time you ever contact me again. To me, you're both dead, Manyando said, crying. While her husband David comforted her. So Mapalo and Chama, her father, left her home, their heads buried in shame. Hi guys, it's your girl Debby again. Thank you so much for watching my story to the end. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one. Do you think Manyando was wrong for not forgiving her twin sister and her father? If you were in her shoes, will you really let bygones be bygones? Please tell me your opinion in the comment section. I'd love to read them. And please support me by subscribing to my channel and liking my videos. So until next time, stay tuned and may God bless you. Bye.